In a commander game with 3 random opponents, you will run into a lot of different decks, and to fight against those different decks, you might need many different tools. Creature removal, graveyard hate, non-creature removal, but you also need space for other utility cards within your own deck, ramp, card draw, life gain, or whatever else your deck requires. So instead of having lots of different tools, you can save space in your deck with multi-tools, cards that have different modes which can help in different scenarios. That's why this month on Better Than a Booster, I'm recommending 10 budget modal spells for your EDH decks, which you can buy for less than a booster pack. This month, I will be showing you cards that cost less than an Assassin's Creed Beyond a Booster, which you can find for around $4.99. So all 10 of these cards can be purchased for less than that. For prices, I'm going to be using this video's sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc. If you want to buy any of the singles or sealed product, you can use my code TTM at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it supports the channel. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. Let's start with the Turtle. I first saw this card in a CEDH game against my friend's Kinnan deck, and wow, this card is good. It does so much. You can bounce creatures, or recur anything you need from the yard, and if it was just those 2 things on some instant, that would be pretty good. But, if needed, you can make a 6/5 flying Ward 2 threat. Also, channel abilities are not the same as casting spells, so normal counter magic won't actually stop these effects. This is a card I would play in almost any Simic deck. I currently use it in my Thrasios Tormod list, and the Turtle is one of the best cards in that deck. And at 35 cents, it's such a cheap card to pick up. The original command cycle is mostly remembered for the Bant ones, but I think Profane Command is pretty underrated. The only one to have an X in its cost. I think it's very good as a 2-for-1, where you kill an opponent's creature and then return one of your own. But it can also be a pseudo fireball if you just need to deal a little extra damage. But the last mode is the strongest in my opinion. Giving fear to X creatures is a lot stronger than I think people realize. Fear is an old keyword we don't see much anymore. It makes a creature unblockable unless it's blocked by an artifact creature or a black creature. Meaning outside of an artifact deck or a black deck, this is functionally unblockable. I have gotten some surprise wins with this card, where X is like 5, and then my whole team becomes unblockable and I zap someone for an extra 5. And then suddenly, their blockers are useless and I can swing in for lethal. This card is dirt cheap at about 40 cents, so try it out. The Confluences came back in New Capenna, and many of them are overcosted. But the Esper one I think is pretty good. This 50-cent card has some unique modes. You can't add it to a random deck though. I think you need to be in a list that wants cards in the graveyard. When you're able to block your opponent's attacker, turn it into a 1/1 with no abilities, and then connive for more value, that's when this card is at its strongest. Plus, late game, drawing your best 3 creatures that died this game can help you recover after a board wipe. Also interesting to note that the last 2 modes can target any creature, including your opponent's stuff, so there are political deals you can make as well. Not all the cards on this list are going to be instants and sorceries. Silverback Elder is a creature that lets you choose modes. Every time you cast a creature, you can either gain life, ramp, or destroy an artifact, or an enchantment. That first mode is really 2 modes if you think about it. It's also very interesting that Silverback Elder triggers on cast, not ETB, so you can't blink a creature to get more value, but this triggering on cast means once you have priority and cast something, you get one of these effects, regardless of removal or counter magic. This is the most expensive card on today's list at about $4, but it is still worth it, I think, in any creature-focused deck. In all of my decks, I try to have some graveyard hate somewhere in the list. There are too many powerful graveyard synergies in the game to not run any way to deal with them. And Rakdos Charm is one of the cards I run to exile graveyards. The artifact destruction mode is also very useful. It's not uncommon to run into an artifact you want to blow up. I'll admit the third mode is not super useful, but sometimes when your opponent combos and makes infinite creatures, you can use that last mode to take them out of the game. You can find a Rakdos Charm for like 75 cents, and if you want to add graveyard hate to a deck, this is a really easy include. Alright, maybe I'm stretching the definition of modal here, but I really wanted to talk about Seize the Spotlight. This card is about $1.30 now, and worth every penny. It kind of has modes, but your opponents get to choose. Normally these Punisher cards where your opponent gets to pick between two options are pretty weak, since your opponent will always pick the option that is best for them. But both modes here are really great. You either threaten a creature or draw a card and make a treasure. If you pair this with a sack outlet, your opponents will be stuck between two bad decisions. Either they have their best creature taken from them, and then they get attacked by that, and then it gets sacrificed to the sack outlet, or you get to draw a card and make a treasure. And it feels awesome when you get to draw 3 cards and make 3 treasures, effectively making this a 0 mana draw 3. I've been playing this card in a bunch of red shells, and I really suggest you do the same. It's very powerful. Insidious Will is a counterspell I really like. It's 4 mana, so you really need to be in a proper control deck that is going to be holding up mana to use this. But the flexibility here is amazing. Early game, using this to copy a ramp spell so you can get extra lands in play can be very powerful. Then, if you want to be defensive, spell redirection is often better than a normal counterspell. If you can point the removal at your opponent's stuff, that's even better than just stopping the removal in the first place. And if you really need it, it can just counter any spell. Plus, late game, you can copy your own spells for even more advantage. At 75 cents, I see no reason not to play this in your blue control decks. At $2, Kaya's Guile is one of the more expensive cards on this list, but still very useful. It has a lot of great modes, but I normally find myself forcing everyone to sack and then exiling their yards. And since the card resolves top to bottom, you do get to exile the creature that they sacrifice. There isn't a time where they get to respond since the whole spell has to resolve. Honestly, the Entwine is just gravy. If you draw this in the late game and have the extra mana, you can get all of the modes. Getting your commander removed a ton and then paying a hefty commander tax can be rough sometimes. If you find your green deck in that situation, maybe try Road of Return, a 60-cent rare from Commander 2019. It can be a regrowth effect for permanents. It also has the unique effect of putting your commander from the command zone back into your hand, allowing you to get around that commander tax. There are very few other cards that have this effect. It's really just Command Beacon, right? Plus, late game, you can do both with Entwine. This card might seem niche, like, yeah, it gets around Drannith Magistrate and works well if your commander has died 3 times or more. But because the other mode is very generically useful, just a regrowth for permanents, it's very uncommon that this card will be totally dead in hand. Play this in your green decks where the commander gets focused down a lot. And lastly, coming in at $3, we have Oltec Matterweaver. This is another cast a creature, get a thing card, but this time for artifacts. The first mode is just for consistency. It makes a 1/1 in case you have no other artifacts. So the card's never dead. But the other mode is really interesting. It works on any artifact token, so if you have treasures lying around, you can now tack a treasure onto all of your creatures, or food tokens or junk tokens or whatever else you have. But if you want power, once you have a stronger artifact token like a construct, suddenly each creature making another one of these constructs will make your board massive really quickly. Also, there are ways to make artifact copies of things. Then you can get into some shenanigans where you make some very powerful copies. I also love that Oltec Matterweaver doesn't require you to cast artifact creatures. It works on any creature. I would also recommend picking this one up sooner rather than later. These big scorecards are a little harder to crack than a normal mythic because of how the big score was distributed. So what did you think? Do you use any of these modal spells in your decks? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so very much for watching, and special thanks to my tier 3 patrons, whose names you see here. If you want to be in the credits, or join the Discord, check out the Patreon, link in the description.